Sam Long. I'm Ron Peters.
And I'm John Nugent.
Welcome to the After Class Podcast, because the best conversations happen
After class.
Thanks for joining us. Another episode of the After Class Podcast. We're glad to have you along. If you listened to us last week, you knew we were going to be on vacation this week, but we're not actually on vacation this week. It's the next day for us. Right. So if you followed all that, we realized we needed to record another one because we would not be here to record for the next week. So it's a day after we recorded the last one, but a week later.
Recording date versus, broadcast date. It screws everybody.
And it's the end of the day for us. And so if there's any sort of sluggishness or lack of coherency, blame the end of the day, the work day.
And the fact it's literally been raining all day.
Yeah.
For real. This is the most rain.
First time in a long time we've had an all-day rain situation.
Yeah. And it basically hasn't stopped at all today. And there's something about a rainy, kind of cold day where it just gets inside your head. Like I said, I wish I was thinking a little bit straighter than I am right now. I think I can handle the episode, though. I think I can do this.
We believe in you.
I believe in you, Sam.
So.
If we don't, we'll give our listeners their money back.
Every single penny.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to give it to go. And, where we're at is we're still figuring out nonviolence and we're still going over passages. I think today the goal is to read a few more passages that have been brought to our attention and then maybe think about some principles and then maybe apply them to questions.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see how far through that list.
Yeah, that's right.
So we have 3 lingering questions of really just passages we haven't discussed yet.
Yeah.
Which I'll lead us off. Because the first one wasn't really a concrete passage, but it was building off of what was found in concrete passages. My good friend Ryan Bunce, you let us know if we got this right. But he's kind of asking the question about, Jesus talks about when someone comes at you violently, turn the other cheek or go the extra mile. It's like respond. It kind of reminds us of the Apostle Paul, who says, "Do not, retaliate. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Which always makes it sound like whenever bad things are happening to us, we somehow have to absorb it, suffer it, or kind of jujitsu it, so in a kind of positive way, so that it's doing good stuff for us, or good stuff for them, or loving them. But is it ever, acceptable to, avoid the situation where someone might be trying to hurt you? Do you always have to go after it in a Jesus-like way, or is there a place for avoidance, just not being in a situation where you might encounter that? So, did you want to kick off our reflection on that, Sam?
Sure. If I can quote the great movie Back to the Future, nobody calls me yellow or chicken, right? So there's an interesting passage in Matthew 10. And Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's letting them know, you're going to be going out, and you're going to be preaching, and you're going to meet with resistance. And it sounds like some of the resistance might get a little violent. And he says, when this happens, there's a suggestion for you. Verse 23 of chapter 10 of Matthew, he says this: when they persecute you in one town. And again, it doesn't seem like it's just, calling them mean names. It's probably going a step further. And because, if there were Pharisees who were very, serious about the Torah and they didn't like what you're saying, it could turn violent on you. So when they persecute you in one town, flee to the next one. For I truly tell you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. He says run away, basically.
Yeah.
So you're out of town, and we're filling in, picture of this, but you're proclaiming the kingdom, and they come at you with stones to stone you. You can run away. In fact, you should run away. Go to the next town, and you keep running until you get to all the towns, and by then maybe the Son of Man will come back. But the advice is, get out of Dodge, because it's not going to end well.
Yeah, and I think that helps us to understand that there are, kind of varying levels of persecution. People are mocking you and making fun of you. You're walking down the street and they're like, there goes one of those Christian guys, That's no fun. Yeah, but, it's not like your life is in danger. But the persecution can cross a line to where you feel like, I think I could die here. And Jesus is saying, then get out of town. I'm not saying you have to die. Now, sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Like they arrest you and you didn't have time to get out of town. That's a different situation. We can talk about some of those case studies that appear in the Bible. But Jesus seems to be saying, if you can get out of town, get out of town and just go to the next town and, keep ministering in that way.
Yeah. And this is consistent with his own example. Like there was a time when, it was his own hometown that just got so mad at what he was teaching, they were going to throw him off a cliff.
Right.
Right. And it just, it says that Jesus kind of like, eluded their grasp and, worked through their midst, and he was gone. Like he didn't say, "Oh, I'm Jesus. I got to just take it. Throw me over." Like he didn't just like go straight into the suffering and embrace it and make it happen. He had a chance to squeak out of there, and he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Luke 4. It's such an interesting, they literally carried him up to the side of the cliff, but then it's just like, but he went through their midst, passed through their midst and went on his way. Like, I don't know what that means, but I like it.
I kind of like to go in the Wayback Machine and see that actually happening. Like, how did he pull that off?
But notice what he did not do. He did not call down legions of angels to defend him.
Yeah.
Right.
Or even when James and John, the sons of thunder, want to do that at one point, Jesus is like, yeah, that's not our game.
Right.
That's not how we respond.
Yeah, and we looked at another passage together at John 8:59 where Jesus is just it's heating up in the temple and it looks like they want to kill him and he hides and then he flees dodge and gets out of the temple and avoids it. And so it's not like, and even though Christians are called to embrace suffering and to like overcome evil with love and with good, it's like not every showdown, not every fight is one you have to suffer to the death. Yeah. Not every fight is one that you have to find a way to transform it into a loving act and response. Like sometimes it's appropriate, apparently for Jesus, and the instruction gives to his disciples to get out of there. Live to fight another day.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I guess there's a time and place, right, to kind of figure this stuff out. And sometimes Jesus does the opposite. Like sometimes, like we have it in John 11, verses 7 through 10, Jesus expresses his intentions to return to Judea. And his disciples are like, what are you, crazy? You're going to go back to that place? They tried to kill us last time. And Jesus is like, nope, we're going to do it. And then he goes into it. And of course he faces a lot of trouble when he's there. And so, sometimes he walks right into it on purpose. Sometimes he avoids it on purpose. And I guess when it comes to what you do, there's a lot of factors in the situation that at least from a biblical perspective, are on the table as options.
Yeah, and I think that Jesus gives us an example of really being Spirit-led. It's like he's not just making that decision for himself, but, he is led by the Father, led by the Spirit. He knows that I've got to go in here because this is what the Father would want me to do. And there are times when he's like, nope, I got to get out of here. This is not a good situation. I don't think he's just doing it based on his own wisdom or whatever, but I think Jesus truly is led by the Father and led by the Spirit in those situations. And that should be us, that there might be opportunities where God is saying, I want you to walk into that situation. And we see examples of that, like even in the book of Acts, that we can talk about here momentarily.
Yeah, sometimes Paul goes to Jerusalem knowing bad things are going to happen, and sometimes he like escapes a city in a basket,
right?
Or just avoids going into a town altogether. Like he gets out of Dodge. Yeah, so there are all sorts of different instances, right?
Yeah, it makes me think of when Paul is heading to Jerusalem after his third missionary journey, and like every step of the way, there's some prophecy that you're going to suffer. And like when he's in Tyre, they're literally begging him, "Don't go to Jerusalem." He's like, "You're breaking my heart. I know that I have to go there."
Yeah.
And I've known some people who said, yeah, Paul was wrong. Like there's some people who think that Paul was not listening to the Spirit in that moment. And I disagree. I think Paul knew exactly what he was doing because God was leading him there. He's like, you're telling me I'm going to suffer. I get that. That's what God is saying. But he's not saying it so that I won't go. He's saying it so that I'll go with my eyes wide open and know what to expect.
Yeah. So maybe that addressed the question.
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't, but we tried, Ryan.
We're going to come back to these sorts of things, I think, later. When we get specific, what do you do? I will say this. If we learn nothing else, we get another sort of attribute of Jesus. Master, Savior, hide-and-seek champion. It's all in the same sort of thing.
He'd have been great at sardines.
Exactly.
Well, and just like another quick example from Acts. So these things are popping into my head. But we were talking this in my Acts class today that, you had Stephen who was stoned to death, but he gave a defense. Like he had to go in there and preach. And I always laugh at Stephen a little bit because it's like he won the argument. Like he could have walked out of there, But he had to take that one last step and say to the people, and you guys are the ones who are just like them, and got them all mad. Stephen dies. James dies. James, the brother of John, ends up dead. But then God miraculously delivers Peter and lets him go free. And we have to understand that God knows what's best. And sometimes God says, buddy, this is going to be the result. And I don't think that Stephen was mad. I think that he crossed that threshold and went, this feels so much better. He didn't cross that threshold of death, bummed out. Or James. But when God says to Peter, you know what? You got to stick around for a while, bud. He's like, I'll stick around, whatever you want me to do. God knows, and we need to let him, make that decision for us.
Good. Well, we do have a question from our esteemed audio editor, Drew Nyquist.
Yes. And so Drew sent us a really interesting question. He was talking about the various soldiers that we see in the Bible, especially in the New Testament. And soldiers show up a lot, especially in Luke Acts. We see a lot of these kinds of guys. And so early in the book of Luke, when John the Baptist is preaching, Luke is unique in that he talks about various groups coming to him and asking him questions. And so it says in verse 14 of Luke chapter 3, soldiers also asked him, John the Baptist, what should we do? And he said to them, don't extort money from anyone by threats or false accusations, and be satisfied with your wages. Which is interesting because that's the exact opposite of, hey, you guys are doing violent stuff, you need to quit. He doesn't tell them to quit the army. He says, just be satisfied with the money you make. In other words, keep doing what you're doing and be satisfied with your wages. And it's very interesting that Jesus doesn't call them out. And even when you get to somebody like Cornelius, who was a Roman centurion, in Acts chapter 10, here is this guy who rose up through the ranks. I mean, this is a guy with a lot of blood on his hands. And now he is a commander of 100 men. But it says that he was somebody who was pleasing to God. His prayers and his alms had risen up to God. And God was so pleased with him that he organizes this meeting with the Apostle Peter. And so that raises a very interesting question. Was God okay with these guys doing, this soldierly work? Or is there something else that we should be taking into consideration?
Yeah. And we have Jairus, right?
Oh, yeah. Or was Jairus, was he a soldier? Or was he the...
No,
I don't know.
Wrong one.
I think
Jairus was the synagogue ruler.
He ring a bell for me.
Right.
Yep.
Was there a soldier who had a daughter or a relative?
Oh, yeah. There was a soldier who had the servant who was dear to him.
That's what I was thinking. Yep.
I think he was
basically the same story, different people.
It actually is, right? There was someone that they wanted healed, and they showed great faith, right? And God brought the healing.
Exactly.
Right, and didn't ask them to quit their jobs.
Yeah, and so that's an important question that I think really deserves an answer.
Well, I'll start with John the Baptist because I think that's the easy one.
Oh, sure. Take the low-hanging fruit.
I think it... Well, I'll combine it with the non-Jairus centurion soldier. Neither of these are conversion accounts.
True.
I mean, people are coming to John the Baptist to be asked, how can I get ready for the kingdom? The Messiah is coming. Right. What can I do to get ready? Well, here's how you can get ready. And but I'm not the guy. I'm not the guy you're going to worship. I'm not the guy who's going to bring the kingdom. I'm not the guy who's going to, right? He can prepare people, right? Tell people the kind of things you got to do to get ready, but it's the one whose sandals, thongs of the sandals, he's unworthy to tie. You got to listen to him. Mm-hmm. So Jesus is the one that's going to lead them into the kingdom and show them what kingdom living entails. John the Baptist, Jesus says, he might be the greatest of the prophets of the old covenant, but the least in the kingdom is greater than John the Baptist. So what he does and does not say, it's all preparatory. I think so. John the Baptist is preparatory in the same way that Isaiah is preparatory, in the way that Joshua is preparatory, in the way that Samuel is preparatory. These are all preparing for Jesus, who is going to reveal God's will for the new covenant people. And John the Baptist's conversations with how people should get ready are not the standard of what someone must do to be saved or how someone must act as a Jesus follower, right? It's directionally accurate, but it's not the whole story. And John the Baptist would be the first one to tell you that. So I don't think you can use this as an example.
Yeah, that John one especially is God's kingdom hasn't come yet. We're not there yet. And so it goes back to where are we in the story and what's going on and like what's the trajectory, and it's just not there yet.
Yeah. And no soldier was converted by Jesus or any of his followers. The mission to the Gentiles doesn't begin until Cornelius, which is the real question, right? I mean, that's the question that needs to be answered. But, the other one that Jesus provided the healing for the servant, that wasn't and that soldier and his whole family became Jews, got circumcised and started following Jesus. It's like Jesus used this person as a look at the great faith this man has. I'd like to see this among my followers.
Right.
He didn't say, look at my newest follower.
Right.
But he used him as an example of someone with great faith. And he often used people that they wouldn't have expected as showing great faith, like a prostitute, right? He didn't say, therefore, prostitution is good. Certain people show great faith, and they're highlighted precisely because his followers wouldn't expect people like that to have great faith. And Jesus is trying to prepare them for the Gentile mission, which doesn't happen till later.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think either of them are a conversion story. You seem doubtful, Ron.
I just have questions. It's not that I'm doubtful, but I don't know if we've answered all the questions that might go along with this. Because like in the Luke story, these soldiers, are they Jews or are they Gentiles? I suspect they're Jewish soldiers. Like there were Jews who were forced to serve in the military. We have records of Jews who were made into soldiers. And so if these people are coming to John the Baptist, if soldiers are coming to him, I strongly suspect that they are probably Jews who are serving in the Roman military.
Yeah, I need to see that evidence. I want to see the evidence for Jews as soldiers, or even if we had evidence that there were some, because there were Jews who did everything. Right. We talked about Nehemiah last week, a Jewish governor. So there's no doubt there are Jews who end up doing things.
Right.
But it's not clear in this account that it was a Jew.
I'm just wondering why a Gentile would come to John the Baptist saying, "What should we do?"
That's a good question.
Yeah. I think it's worth exploring. I agree. It's worth exploring. But my strong suspicion is that these are Jews who are serving as soldiers.
But still, John the Baptist is not acting with full revelation of the nature of the kingdom and what it's going to mean for the followers. So he's not even in the Jesus position to know what a kingdom ethic with regard to the sword is going to be.
Fair point. But we've made a very strong argument for the Old Testament proclaiming, being peaceable, make peace with your enemies,
leave vengeance to God.
Right. Well, and I think there's an answer to that though. I do think that there may be an answer, and this is where I still want to do a little bit of research, but I think that's a good answer, is that they probably don't have the option of quitting the military. Once you're in the military back then, it's not like a volunteer army where you can just quit whenever you want. But if you're in the military, you're in until you are discharged. And it's not like you can go to your commander and say, I don't believe in this anymore. I'm not going to fight. I mean, a lot of the military was made of captured foreign soldiers who are now being forced to fight for Rome. And it's not like they can just walk away. That was part of the way that Rome kept replenishing its military stocks was, we beat you, now you're going to fight for us. And don't think that you can quit because, you're either going to die in battle or we're going to kill you ourselves. And so I think that, for John to say, you have to give up being in the military would mean you're going to die. Now, some people might say, okay, that's fine, but it just might be too far. He's like, yeah, you got to serve. Rome is making you serve. That's understandable. But here's how you can reflect God's kingdom as a soldier.
Well, and if you're going to go that route, you would also point out, I was going to save this for the Cornelius bit, but I mean, there are soldiers who had a wide variety of functions.
Yeah.
Right. And, it's kind of like when you were in the Middle East, Sam, when I went on that trip, when we were in Syria, there was a tourist police with us, right? This guy with a gun. Everywhere we went, he went with us. And it's like everyone, when they reach a certain age, enters the military.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice.
Right.
Right. And then really they're entering state employment, and they are used to keep the peace. Right. And this guy's job was to go with tourist groups and keep them safe. Be a presence.
Yeah.
Be a presence, be aware, be a communication with the wider police force. If something goes down, you've got the walkie-talkie, you're on there. If things are getting crazy, you got your gun, But not all these people were soldiers killing people. Right. They had obligatory functions which had varying degrees of involvement in violence. And there are different versions of statecraft and involvement, and we're going to get into this when how does this apply to our lives?
Right.
Like, should someone join the police? What does it mean to join the police? There's so many different jobs in the police force, and some that may be a lot more compatible with Christian service than others, right? And so if there were Jews in there, were there Jews who were willing to kill fellow Jews on behalf of Rome?
Right.
That would be a very oxymoronic thing, unless they
Yeah.
were just sellout Jews.
Like, they could be just people sold out.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're sellouts if they're coming to John, obviously.
Well,
But no,
or they could be inquirers.
Yeah.
Who
Well-
maybe they feel a little convicted. This guy's preaching some stuff. Maybe this little alliance I made with Rome isn't so bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot we don't know.
Exactly. There
What
is a lot we don't know.
function they had, what they were doing day in and day out. So we don't know that these were like murderous soldiers.
Yeah.
They could have been peacekeepers who keep the peace just by their presence and their marching. And in a situation, they would de-escalate rather than respond violently. Or who knows what they would or would not have done.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point. It's like there could be some Jews who are like, I will not fight for you. We will kill you. All right, I'll die. And they're like, all right, let's find something else for them to do. It's like,
Peel potatoes.
yeah,
Right.
literally, there could be other jobs that they would say to them, all right, fine, we'll put you to work doing this or that. Your job is crowd control. Just make sure that nobody gets out of control. And so, yeah, those are the kinds of things that you can envision happening in the ancient Near East, where there are Roman soldiers and they are Jews, but maybe they have very specific functions. And again, we don't know, but we're proposing things that are legitimate options. Different way of thinking about it.
And no matter what, it still comes down to this is not a conversion account. They don't come to Jesus. They're just told what to do to get ready for the Messiah's coming.
Yeah.
So there's only so much you can do with that.
So next up would be Cornelius.
Because he definitely comes to Jesus.
That is,
Yes.
yeah, without
He
a
and his whole
doubt.
family.
There is indisputable visual evidence to affirm the fact that he has had a come to Jesus moment. And it's like I said before, this is a centurion, and it's not like centurions are really interesting because they're usually foot soldiers who have done so well in battle and shown such great leadership that they get elevated through the ranks. So you just can't dispute the fact that this guy has got a lot of blood on his hands if he's a centurion. And yet, when it talks about the kind of person that he is, I got to put on my reading glasses here, but this angel appears to him and he says, your prayers and alms have ascended as a memorial before God. And so like, there's something about this guy who is that makes him really stand out. In fact, it says he was a devout man who feared God with all of his household, gave alms generously to the people and prayed and all that kind of stuff. And so, Luke really talks this guy up, who is a centurion working in Caesarea, probably working for the Roman governor there and all this kind of stuff. And so what do we do with this guy who God clearly has a lot of admiration for? God has given him the 2 thumbs up and arranges for a meeting between Cornelius and Peter. Does this guy represent a version of violence that Christians can accept?
You first.
Sure.
Sure, me, why not?
I'm not sure I have a great explanation. I mean, on the one hand, what we want Peter to say, he doesn't say when it comes to violence. He doesn't say a lot of things, right? He just says, basically, here's what's happened. And he says, oh, you've had the Holy Spirit. Let's get you baptized. And, we can't hold it back. And they were baptized, and they invited him to stay. There's not a lot of discussion about what he should. Didn't say he should stop idolatry. Didn't say he should stop swearing. Didn't say a lot of things he should stop. And so, I get that that's our focus because, yes, he's a centurion. That would be in the forefront of Peter's mind. I don't know. Would it be? Maybe. So that's one.
Or even
aspect.
Luke's mind.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Luke is recording the breaking down of the wall between Jew and Gentile and the Spirit poured out on Gentiles. There's not what must a Gentile do to be saved? What must change in their life? There's no mention of repentance at all.
Right.
Right? There's no mention of, we shouldn't assume that everyone in that household has never sinned. They're sinless. No one needs to repent. They have nothing to repent of. Nothing in their life needs to change because Luke didn't say you have to quit the military, and you've got to stop drinking too much whiskey, and you've got to stop, like beating your brother, or there's nothing about anyone's sin that has to change, because it's not a what must I do, how must my life change account. It's look at how God broke down the wall between Jew and Gentiles through the Spirit account.
Yeah, it's not there's no argument from silence. Like, that's not what it's about. But I would wonder if, what do you think about a parallel being like Philemon, where everyone wants Paul to say, dude, you shouldn't have slaves. But he doesn't say that, right? And so, is it, where are we in the story? What's going on? Or, is he making a different point and trying to get him, down the road, you assume he'll get to the point where he won't have slaves. He'll figure it out. And maybe down the road, Cornelius will get to the point where, yeah, if I'm going to be part of this kingdom of peace, I shouldn't be in that. Maybe, but that's down the road. That's not the most important thing on the table, right? There's other things at play, I don't know, your eternal salvation, and bringing in what the gospel, breaking, like I said, among the Gentiles. That's far more important than, well, you got to quit the military now. Well,
I mean, there's
money
a whole
warmonger.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole strain of Jewish thought that says sometimes we just got to fight. I mean, that's what you have in the Maccabean revolt.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sometimes you just got to fight. Sometimes you got to fight with your enemies. Sometimes you got to kill your enemies. And that's what you have in the Maccabees. They're like, and we're going to win because of our zeal for the law, and God is on our side. And so there's that whole strain of that thought, even though we see in the Old Testament, God is calling them to be peaceful people, and he seems to be moving them in that direction. There is still that mentality that we can fight, and they feel perfectly justified in that. And I don't think that people who are military men feel like somehow they're violating the covenant in terms of Jews. So then when you have a guy like Cornelius, who was a Roman soldier, and he's called a devout man, so clearly he has some level of devotion that makes him an admirable man. Within that context, there's not this idea that, oh, if I'm engaging in violence, I can't somehow serve God. I can't be in the military and somehow be devout towards God. They don't see a contradiction there. But what I do see is that not only does he become a believer, him and his whole household, they speak in tongues, indisputable visual evidence. It says that after this whole thing happens, Acts chapter 10, verse 48, they speak in tongues. Peter orders them to be baptized. Then they invited him to stay for several days. It's like, well, what happened over that course of several days? Did they just have a big party, eat, drink, and be married? Or did Peter give them further teachings about Jesus? Right. It's like, okay, Cornelius, you believe in Jesus. That's great. God has blessed you and made you a part of his kingdom. But here's what Jesus taught us. And this is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. We don't get the specifics, but it's not a stretch to say that Peter was teaching him the things that Jesus taught. And that in the midst of that, Cornelius might go, you know what? I'm moving into a new thing here. And being a follower of Jesus means being a peacemaker. I don't know it, but it's not unreasonable to think that maybe he began to question some things he never questioned before, like so many people do when they become followers of Jesus.
Yeah. So the text just simply doesn't tell us that Peter endorsed his current profession and said, yeah, it's compatible. So Christians in all ages, it's a compatible profession. Nor does it say that you have to quit your job. It's an argument from science to assume, it sounds for us to assume he must have told him he quit his job, right? And it would be an argument sounds for us to assume that he didn't have to, or that, but another element that we've kind of assumed in this hypothetical scenario is that the guy was still actively serving. He could have been retired, right? After people retire, it's like, who's that guy next to? Oh, yeah, that's the professor. He spent the last 50 years of his life as a professor, but he could be retired from service. He might not even be active anymore. We don't even know we know his profession, but is he still on active duty? Is his becoming a devout Jew, was that a game changer that led him to choose early retirement? Just as being a Jew, he couldn't be someone who worked for the Roman Empire as a Jew. The Jewish law is still pretty strict about mixing with the Gentiles.
Yeah.
And being in the Roman army, which is why I'm skeptical about John the Baptist's buddies too. But that's his conversion away from active soldiery could have happened a long time ago. Or he may have even come to faith in the God of Israel after his retirement. So I don't know. We're told about who this man is and their identity, but there's just so much we don't know. And I think that's one of them.
To be fair, he's a God-fearer as opposed to a devout Jew.
Right.
But still, like
they're doing everything they could without being circumcised.
Yeah, we still don't know anything about him.
Yeah. I don't think he's retired. Again, I'm not. What you're saying, John,
Don't tell me what you think. Tell me what you see in the text.
I'm saying the text, I think, suggests he's not retired. Because in verse 7 of chapter 10, it says, when the angel had spoke to him and left, he called 2 of his slaves and a devout soldier from the ranks of those who served him. And after telling them everything, he sent him off to Joppa. So it sounds like...
So he still have people reporting to him?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it sounds like that. And again, is there a way of reading that allows him to be retired? I won't rule it out, but it sounds pretty strongly like he's still actively serving. So
yeah,
I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, I like that evidence. I think does increase your case. And we don't know what retired life is like. I mean, when I was taught about this passage and taught about how Romans retire and what their service is like, and like you do active duty and then you have this cush duty at the end, but you have this status, and so you still have servants that it's like your retirement package still comes with the benefits of it, but you're not actually serving. But could be. I can see that as service. We'd need to know more.
Yeah, and you're right. We would want to learn more. That's just it. And this is, this is as a side note here. This is why we do the things we do. Why do we spend so much time studying things like history and language and culture and stuff like that? Because the question of whether or not this guy is serving as an active soldier is an important question. And if we can amass enough evidence to say, yeah, he is retired, and he might even have some soldiers still working for him as a retired centurion, if you can prove that from history, great. It's like what you were saying earlier, John, about, hey, can you prove it that there were Jews serving in the Roman military? Yeah, let's go back and look at the sources and see if that bears out.
Yeah. And are they Jews who are in good standing with the Lord?
Yeah.
But Cornelius clearly was.
Yeah.
By virtue of his good deeds. And it would be hard to imagine like that he would be a centurion that was extorting people. That
right,
he was like using his sword violently, that like he must be converted as much as a God-fearer converts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, I don't like the first argument's sufficient for me, that there's no need to make sorts of like all sorts of logical leaps about, well, he's retired or not retired, or how, like, it's just a matter of we could do the worst thing. He is a centurion who kills people every single day. Like that we could make that case, and still it doesn't have to be told to leave the army, because that's not what it's about. And that's one glimpse into his conversion, not a life of discipleship. And so that's, for me, that's sufficient.
Yeah. So the soldier accounts, they're interesting, and they raise questions for what they say and what they don't say. They certainly can't be like, trump card C. Violence is compatible with following Jesus, because the John the Baptist people, the healing, Cornelius, they're not the proof that they seem they are. And it's similar to the cases like, and we never brought these up, but like Esther, being married to the king,
right?
And Joseph being like second in command with Pharaoh, and Moses, these people who Daniel working for, pagan rulers, like there are these exceptional Jews that find themselves in high places, and God uses them in a significant way to save the life of his people or to keep the salvation history story alive.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very much exceptional people that we find in places we don't expect them to find them.
Yeah.
Right.
But the fact that Esther finds herself married to a pagan king doesn't overturn all the Jewish laws about not marrying Gentiles.
Right.
That still is, though Esther makes it into the canon, still marrying unbelievers and un-Jews remains a principle that Christians should follow.
Mm-hmm.
Esther doesn't overturn that, nor does Joseph, nor does Daniel. All of them are striving to be faithful where they find themselves, and a lot of them didn't choose to be where they were.
Right. Esther wasn't like, man, I really want to find myself a husband. Let's pick a Persian, like, pagan king. Like, that's not how it went.
Yeah. And Joseph didn't say, I want to be enslaved, thrown into a pit, and then, like, eventually end up serving Pharaoh.
Yeah.
It's not what he grew up wanting to be.
Right.
But.
All right. Well, we have one more sort of passage we haven't talked about at all, and that's the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've read anything from Revelation probably for a while. And the reason is, well, there's plenty of reasons, but this particular topic, Some will suggest you talk about being nonviolent, and you talk about like all this peace and love and business, but Revelation is not that book. Revelation is full of imagery, of violent imagery. I mean, it is like they could make a movie out of this and it'd be a blockbuster. There'd be all sorts of things happening. There's lots of violence, including things falling out and killing people and dragons and plagues, like all the rest. Like, so what do you do with the fact that the last book in the Bible, like
The last word,
right? The last word seems to be circulating images of violence. Would you like to give us some examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't go through every single one of them because we're running out of time here. We've got
No,
like
because
less
there's
than
too
10
many.
minutes left. Right. But I mean, you get to chapter 16 and it talks about like the bowls of God's wrath being poured out. And so like this second angel pours it out and the sea became like blood and everything in the sea died. Third angel pours out his bowl. It's a time of judgment. The fourth one pours out his bowl and it's like scorching people with fire. And so, yeah, it's just like these images of violence. Later, it talks about the Battle of Armageddon, where you have all these soldiers being killed, and there's so much blood that it's like up to a horse's mouth. That's like 5 feet deep in blood, and it's the blood from these dead soldiers. And so, if you're going to talk about a book that seems to celebrate violence, certainly Revelation would have to be held out as that book. And so, what does it say about violence? What does it say about, especially our participation in violence? And there's one passage that kind of sticks out to me in terms of, like who is engaging in the violence. I always hate turning the pages in my Bible because sometimes they're so thin that I literally cannot turn the page to where I want to go.
Like your skin's getting.
Well, I can't deny the fact that as I get older, things get harder. So, but what's kind of interesting is like who's doing the fighting here. And so like in Revelation 19, you've got this, war against, the Jesus and the hosts of heaven. And you've got this massive army that are aligned with Jesus. And they're going to war against like the beast and the false prophet. And so, there's this big war. The two armies come against each other. And at the end of it, the beast and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire. And in verse 21, it says, and the rest were killed by the sword of the rider on the horse, the sword that came from his mouth, and all the birds were gorged on their flesh, which is another image of violence there. But it's not like you have these two armies clashing with each other. Jesus has an army that doesn't seem to do anything. They just show up and watch the battle. And it's Jesus himself who is the one who defeats their enemy. And there are like a number of things that come out of it. Number one, it's apocalyptic literature. Let's be careful we don't over-literalize it because apocalypses aren't meant to be taken literally, despite what some so-called prophecy experts say. And the other thing is that even in Revelation, it's not like God's people are taking up swords and going and fighting. God's people are the ones who are like, God, are you ever going to do anything about this? They're the saints who are below the altar who are saying, are you ever going to avenge our blood? And God's like, just give me a minute. You just have to wait a while. But God is the one who takes vengeance. And it seems to be drawing upon that very thing that we've said so often. Vengeance is God's. I will avenge. Let God take care of it. It's not our job to worry about it. And even when Jesus has a whole army gathered with him, he's just like, stay back, boys. You stay behind me, and I'll take care of this battle for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that last point is really vital. We've been saying all along that God's people can return good for evil out of the conviction that it's God who will avenge, and he will do it on Judgment Day. Like, it may not happen in your lifetime. You may go down. You may be a martyr. You may be slain, fighting with love and returning and turn the other cheek. Like, you might suffer horribly, and you can go down to the grave in peace, suffering for your faith, knowing that God will avenge. And Revelation is the book where it kind of shows in apocalyptic language, God sets the record straight.
Yeah.
The violent forces of the world. And the enemy in Revelation is not like all the people who were presented the gospel and said no. Like, the enemy in Revelation is the Roman Empire, right? The violent Roman Empire, the imperial cult that's leading people away in idolatry, right? It's, it's not just like going around killing everyone, although more people end up in a lake of fire. But but the point is, like, at the end of the story, God does avenge his people.
Yeah.
And where are the people? What's the people's role in the story? They are represented by the martyrs whose robes are soaked in blood, who died at the hands of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Like, that's the role of God's people. They're the martyrs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the martyrs kind of represent them, and their call is to be faithful and to persevere. Like the letters from the churches, don't say to any of the churches in Revelation, all right, this big battle's coming, I need you to strap on a sword, right? It's kind of like, you need to be patient, you need to be faithful to the point of death. And even, I think you're right in pointing out, let's not over-literalize apocalyptic literature, because, in these scrolls of wrath that kind of are opened up upon the earth, these bowls of wrath and scrolls, right?
Scrolls, trumpets, and bowls.
Yeah, who is worthy to open the scroll, right? The seal that's going to reveal the key to world history. It's the Lion of Judah, and they're expecting this great, ferocious animal, victorious, symbolic, strong beast, and Jesus appears as a lamb with his neck slain, right?
Slaughtered
with blood
lamb.
pouring out. It's like, how does Jesus win this victory? He did it on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
He did it through him laying his life down. And so, like, that's the image of Jesus that's in the middle of this book of Revelation. Yeah. And so when you do a deep dive into the logic of the letter, which we can't do today, but if you follow the logic of the Revelation, paying attention to the place of God's people, the place of Jesus, the images for Jesus, the timetable, how things go down. I've had, close friends of mine who have gone through, who were not at all committed to nonviolence as kind of a Christian principle, that after a deep Bible study of Revelation forsook justified violence and chose a path of nonviolence because of Revelation, once they understood the actual inner logic of the book and the role of the slain lamb and the martyrs and the witnesses in the book.
Yeah, I think your point about the lack of activity by the saints is vital, because the apocalyptic worldview, there's this final battle between good and evil. I think the expectation is, good people and bad people, and God will fight for us too, but like we'll actually be part of it. But the army is the armies of heaven.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? It's not even that the saints are just sitting back not fighting. They're not even at the battle. Right? It's the armies of heaven and Jesus, and then of course Jesus does all the fighting and does all the killing.
The slain lamb.
Yeah. Right, the slain lamb does, and so I think so. For someone in the first century who's expecting this big battle scene that they're going to be a part of, they're going to be on one side or the other. They're actually not. They're left on the sidelines, like they're not even in it. And I think that's one way to just acknowledge it on what you're saying. Like, you read the Revelation, and God's doing it all. We're suffering, and then we're receiving this blessing at the end of it, and that's our role. Not making it happen, not being part of the big battle, just being faithful, and that's our role.
Yeah, our hope is in the resurrection that is promised in the book for those who remain faithful to the end. And what faithfulness to the end looked like for God's people all through Revelation is not surrendering to the imperial cult, right? Not going apostasy, right? And accepting the suffering and persecution, whatever may come your way, or the public shame, or there's a lot to figure out. And we've talked about this in previous episodes of just how volatile the situation was in Rome. But it's enduring to the end, likely death in worst case scenarios. And then you get to identify with all those in white robes who earned their white robes and their spot before the throne because they suffered to the point of death. There's no wreath given to any champion among God's people who fight against the Roman Empire and strap on the sword and go after it. They're never the hero of this. Any Jew or any Christian who takes on that kind of response. There's no Maccabean group here.
Right.
I agree.
And it's much different than the war scroll, even of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Like these people who, this minority Jews that have this war scroll, this end time battle. And they believe God is going to fight for them, and the angels are going to fight for them, and they're going to be right there in the battle.
Yeah.
And this one is so strikingly the opposite of
Mhm.
that,
Yeah.
that it's hard to justify it as any kind of principle that Christians would participate in war.
Yeah, I think everybody sees it as like the Avengers Endgame. We just got two sides and everybody's fighting, and we just happen to be on the winning side. And you're right, Revelation just doesn't present it that way. Even the armies of God are like, just sit back, boys, I got this. You don't need to be a part of it because Jesus has it covered. And it's interesting, it's a sword that comes out of his mouth. It's like, this doesn't seem like a normal sword. It's a sword image, but if you over literalize it, you're going to get it wrong. It's like, we're going to overcome by God's word. We're not going to kill them, but God's word is what's going to overcome them. And so it's our job to proclaim that word.
Mm-hmm.
So we did our best to come up with a list of relevant verses, and then you did your best to supplement with all the ones that we left out. And so we've gotten literally to the end.
Yes.
And so our best job to convey all the material in the Bible, or as much of represented material as possible. Next week, we talk about some preliminary conclusions and then test it against, well, what would you do in this situation? Or what does that mean for this situation?
Yeah.
So maybe next week is the episode you've really been waiting for.
Probably.
But how long did it take us to get here?
25. I don't know.
We're at about 15 weeks here, so
Okay.
it's crazy. All right, thank you so much for joining us in this episode of the After Class podcast. After Class because
The best conversations happen
After class.